Hi there, it's Nisha. Welcome to part 2 of how to edit your food photos for Instagram. If you haven't seen part 1 of this video yet, I will link to it right here. And in today's video, I'll share the rest of my top 10 tips for food photography editing. If you use any of these tips or techniques in your photos, be sure to tag me on Instagram so I can check out your work. And if you find this video useful or learn something new, please hit that thumbs up button. And finally, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and hit that red subscribe button because very soon I'll be coming out with a new video on Lightroom food photography editing. All right, let's get right into tip number 6. I've alluded to this before, but you want to make sure that you're editing your food photos gradually and selectively. For instance, if you increase the contrast or clarity or vibrance on a photo all the way up, you're going to end up with a photo that's frankly ridiculous looking. So I encourage you to take baby steps and adjust the values in small increments of 5 to 10. You also want to be editing selectively, and I think this is a really important piece of advice. Before you even edit the photo, really study it and ask yourself before, what do you like about it? What do you want to change? What do you want to enhance? Do you want to make the photo brighter or darker? Do you want to bring out the greens or the reds? You should know the answers to these kinds of questions before you start editing. And just because you have the power to edit something, it doesn't mean you have to actually edit it. My next tip will save you some time because it's to edit only the good photos and throw away the rest. Food photography editing is for enhancing and for correcting problems. So if you take a photo of a stack of pancakes and one side has a lot of dark shadows, you can bump up the shadows on that side. Or if you have a really cool white balance, you can increase the warmth. Or, if you find a hair in your soup after the fact, you can edit that out. Unfortunately, that happens to me more than I'd like to admit, but that's what happens when you have hair. Food photography editing is not, however, for transforming bad photos into good ones. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work that way. The best you'll be able to do is take a bad photo and turn it into a mediocre photo. So you have to be selective in your editing, especially on Instagram where hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people, are sharing food photography every day. If you post mediocre photos, they're not going to get noticed. That sounds a little harsh, but it actually works in your favor. For instance, if you see a photo that you've taken, you don't really like it, it's not very good, you don't have to spend any time editing it and trying to make it look better. You can just trash it and move on. My next piece of advice for food photography editing is to edit with a small screen size in mind. Since Instagram is a mobile app, you only have a small screen size to work with, so your photo really needs to pop. To make your photo pop more, you can do a couple things. First, crop your photo a little tighter than you ordinarily would. I typically use a 5:4 aspect ratio or a square crop for Instagram photos because I find that 4:3 or 3:2 aspect ratios don't look as good on Instagram. Sometimes increasing the vibrance or contrast a little more than you ordinarily would can also help. Again, don't take this too far, but increasing the vibrance or contrast can make your photo pop just a little bit more. Finally, I find that having less clutter and fewer props and more of a singular focus on the food itself or the specific dish works best on Instagram in most cases, though not necessarily the case for a blog photo, for instance. This is partly a tip for food photography before you even get to the editing, but it's also something you can do in the editing phase by focusing on the main element, which I'll talk about in the final tip. This next tip is particularly important for Instagram, and that's to edit in a consistent way or use the same presets and filters. As you may know, when you post an image to Instagram, you're not just posting a one-off photo. You're posting an image to your feed, which appears as a grid. And when someone decides to follow you or not, they're going to be looking at your page as a whole. And if your photo looks really haphazard with different editing styles here and there, they may be less likely to follow you because it just looks random. That doesn't mean you shouldn't experiment with different editing styles. My editing style has certainly evolved over the last couple years and many times. And that's one of the fun parts of being an artist and a photographer. But for the first 9 or 12 or 15 photos, it can be really helpful to have a consistent aesthetic, a consistent editing style, so that everything flows together. So people know what they're getting when they come to your page. They can instantly recognize your photos, and that's always a great thing to have. Before you take your photo, you want to know what the hero element of the photo is. What's the main subject? What's the main part? What do you want the viewer to get out of it? For instance, if you're shooting a grilled cheese, maybe it's the cheese oozing out of the sandwich. Or if it's ice cream, maybe it's the creamy texture or the messy spill. Or if it's pancakes, maybe it's the maple syrup drizzling down the pancakes. Whatever the hero is, you want to edit your photo in a way that highlights the hero. This is really important for Instagram because your followers are going to be scrolling really quickly, and if something doesn't pop out at them, then they're probably just going to skip it. Once you do your basic edits like changing exposure or contrast, you want to isolate that hero element and edit it specifically. There are tons of ways to do that in Lightroom, and I'll show you how I do it in the following video on Lightroom food photo editing. But for now, just think about it from a basic standpoint. If you have a hero element, maybe you want it to be sharper, maybe you want it to be brighter, maybe you want it to have a little more color. So you really want to edit with that specific hero in mind. If you use any of the techniques I talked about today, leave me a comment below and give this video a thumbs up. And find me on Instagram at Rainbow Plant Life if you have any more questions about editing. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.